Hey guys, it's Mrs. Carly. I am a pre-K teacher and I have been for 10 years now. I am making videos to share with parents and other early childhood educators. When I say early childhood, I'm talking about anywhere from birth to about 8 years old. In this case, I'm narrowing it down to maybe 1 or 2 years old up to about 7 years old for this video. So this is a resource that I like to use in my classroom, and I just wanted to share with you all what I do with it and what how you can use it at home or in your own classroom for your own practice. My biggest thing I will tell you is know your student. If it's your own child, don't push them too far. If they're not ready for it, don't be afraid to take steps backwards. Sometimes we think, oh, they're so on it and they're not quite ready for that next step yet. That's okay. Just take it back a little bit and work on that. So without further ado, this is number Stax. I use this in my classroom. I just found it this year. It's fantastic. I'm not trying to sell this to you. This is just something that I found on Facebook because isn't that where everybody finds everything? So I got this on I saw this on Facebook and then I looked it up and I found it for myself. I'm gonna go ahead and open it so you guys can see what it is. So I've got all of these foam blocks and you'll notice that there are rhinestones on many of these numbers. The reason is because I added those. So just to give you a little background on that, there's something called touch points. Our county uses them a lot. I'm going to set this box aside so I'm not awkwardly holding it. Our county uses it a lot, and it's a way that kids can actually touch the number that they're seeing and count along, and it makes math more tactile. So that's what those little beads are. And I'll get into a little bit more about that as we go on. So the reason that I chose this as a resource was because, go ahead and get these three out to show you. They're all different sizes. So step one, if you've got really young children, I've got a 3-year-old upstairs. She is able to identify numbers 1 through 10, which is like, yay, happy mom moment, right? But if she wasn't, that would be my first step, was just to show her 1, 2, 3, and get her introduced to those numbers, help her to know what those are. The next part that you can do with this that I really like is you can have 2 numbers side by side and you can teach greater than, less than. Because they are different heights, you can actually see 3 is greater than or more than 2, and 2 is less than or fewer than 3. So you can do that with it. On the sides, they do have these little notches that are trimmed out, and you can count that if you wanted to. I put the touch points on just because my students are very familiar with that already, and it's something that they use for quite a while throughout. So that's what that is about. Another thing I like about it is because of the size, you can have your students order these from smallest to largest if they do not know how to put the numbers in order. So again, it's another way to identify the numbers, that they can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if they would make a mistake, for instance, this is a big mistake, but if they were not yet able to identify the numbers and they did something like this, you could say, okay, I see what you've done. Now, this means that they do not know what these numbers are. They cannot identify them. So you're going to tell them to put them in order from smallest to tallest. And that should help them to correct it so that they look like the old school Verizon bars, right? So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can talk about that. If it was that big of a mistake like I just showed you, you may just want to stick with 1 through 4, right? There are a lot of different ways you can do that though. You can even get them all the way up to the number 10. 10 doesn't have any touch points because it's only for numbers 1 through 9. So that is why there are no shiny gems on the 10. The next thing that I'll tell you about is that those touch points, it also helps to quantify these numbers. So you'll notice that there's only one gem on the 1, so the kids can touch it and count 1. The kids can count this one, they can touch 1, 2. And these gems are really cheap. I bought these on Amazon for like $7. I had a big old package of them. My little girl took all the blue gems today and made jewelry out of it. Very cute. So higher skills, now that we've gone through that, because the greater than, less than, I did with my students a lot whenever I was just introducing this, because they mostly knew the numbers at this point. And again, that's for pre-K. And then I did a lot of the greater than, less than, and I did ordering, and I had them do the touch points and practice counting. So now we're gonna get into that higher skill level. So you might see something set up like this, and you need to figure out the quality. So 4 is less than 5. So then you have to ask your student, well, what do you need to add to 4 to get to 5? So to add 4 to get to 5, we know as adults, you add 1, right? The cool thing is these measure up perfectly with each other. So 4 plus 1 is 5. But if a student doesn't know and they're experimenting and just learning this, they can do, ooh, that's too tall. I need a smaller one than that. And they go back to the 1. See how that works? So I know this sounds really simple to a lot of adults, but for children, it's not as simple as you might think. Something I like to do is I like to start kids with a number, like the 5, and I don't tell them anything. I just give them the blocks, or I've made paper versions. We'll get into that in a little bit. And I say, make as many ways as you can to make 5. So then they're sitting there and they may come up with some things. And typically, you'll see this too if you choose to follow this method. You'll see something like that. They won't usually go straight to the 2 because they get a little nervous about that. Or you'll see them stack up a bunch of 1s. That happens a lot. And they might do 2 2s and a 1 on top. But they'll play with this and they'll be doing this, and you'll see that they come up with all these different configurations. This is a great thing to do in group work. I really like to put different groups of students together and have them do this, and I set a timer usually for about 2 minutes and let everybody try to figure it out, and then I have them stop and look at the other groups work, check that out, and then come back, and then I tell them to tell me some different ways that they made 5. And if it wasn't correct, we go back and we revisit it. If it is correct, we say, that's awesome, good job, that is a way to make 5. Now, something you can do with this, because 2 2 and 1 make 5, but you can also say, oh, so you can say that 2 and 2 is 4, and you add 1 more. You can show them why it's equivalent to 5. You can show that 3 and 1 make 5, but look here, you can also switch it out for a 2, because 1 plus 1 is 2. And even though they may not be familiar with that language of plus and equal, they will start learning that by playing with this and you just using that language. Okay, so went through the group work, went through different configurations. Now, something else I like to do is I like to give students a starting point. Knocking my blocks down so I have space. So sometimes I'll give them a starting point and I'll say, you have a 5, and this is the next level, right? So you have a 5 and I'm giving you a 3. I want you to add to the 3 to make it equal the 5. So then they're looking at it, and again, they're usually not going to go for the 2. Sometimes they will. Sometimes you get students who are like, I got this, and they take the 2 and they put it on top. A lot of times you see 3 and 1 and 1. And you're going to praise the effort because that's really good. Remember, they're just starting this. So you can say, yes, that does equal 5. Let's look at it. You have 1, 2, and 3. So we already know that we've got 3 as the starting point. So we're gonna say 3, and then we're gonna count up from there. 4, 5. And then I go on to say, so how many more did you need than 3 to get to 5? And you can even show them this, and they can go, I needed 1, 2 more. And I say, oh, 2 more. So then you can replace it with the 2. And you know that 3 plus 2 is 5. So I talk about that a lot. This is also a great way to teach that the equal sign, or saying equal, does not mean and the answer is. Because whenever we get into algebra, we don't always see 2 plus 3 is 5. Yes, that is one thing that you might see. But you might also see 3 plus what is 5. And you see that on paper as 2 plus question mark, 2 plus a, 2 plus x, whatever it is, equals 5. So they have to figure that out to figure out that 2 plus 3 is 5. So remember that the equal does not always mean and the answer is. So you want to give them some different ways to figure that out. And it starts early. And the earlier you start it, the more comprehensive it will be throughout their lives. I like to use these with touch points first so that students really learn that. Most of my students did not get out of the touch points this year, and that's totally fine. I'm not saying that is a good thing or a bad thing. They're in pre-K, they're 4, they're 5 years old. So I'm not too concerned about that. Now, what I will say though is if you've got a student or a child who is really excelling at this, go ahead and write the numbers on the back like that, and then have them try to figure it out. And then they'll have to play with it, and they'll still know what the equality means, but then they can see it, and this is starting to lead to a more abstract way of seeing it. 3 plus 2 is 5. Then you can scaffold even further by having the written equation on paper so that you have 3 plus question mark equals 5. And what 3 plus question mark is, they would have to figure that out. And they could use these manipulatives to get to that point until they didn't need them anymore and it was completely abstract and you could take those away. All right, so I had to make my own version of this because while I love these number stacks, and I can't say enough good things about them, again, not selling them, I wanted multiple sets of them for my classroom, and I did not have multiple sets. So I ended up doing something that was incredibly tedious, but totally worth it in the end. And I made it so that I could send these home with every student in my class. I made strips, and you'll see they measure exactly the same as these. I used a paper cutter that had the inches on the side and on the top, and I made it so that I made it by 10 by 2 inches. And then I went to the 9, I made it 9 by 2 inches, etc. And that gave the kids a chance, even though they were flat, they could still measure them up a little bit, and that allowed for more group work so that I could have multiple groups of students doing this at once. I was able to send this home with students, and it is a lot of work. It is true. Whoops. But it is worth it in the end, I think, to be able to do this. So I think that's about it for this. If anybody has any questions, or if you found something that works really well that gets at this home or in your own classroom, please comment below. I would love to see that. And I will talk next time about subitizing or subitizing. Because I know people you say that word differently everywhere. But yeah, I'd love to share with you, and I'd love for you to share with me. Let me know what you think.